Yeah, so it's Parshas Vayera, and we have the pasuk Vayoymar. Avram Avinu says, "Adonai imno matzasi chen be'einecha al no ta'aver me'al avdecha." So this Aleph Daled Nun Yud, there's a machlokes in Chazal if it means my masters or it means Hakadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, there's a difficulty in this pasuk because it says Aleph Dalid Nun Yod, which normally we would understand means my masters, sirs. So we're talking about more than one. But the pasuk continues, Im na matzasi chen be'inecha, if I found favor in your eyes, al no taver me'al avdecha, you shouldn't pass by the side of your servant, on the side of your servant. So the pshat is that the pasuk is in Lashon Yochid. It begins with Lashon Rabim, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, and continues in Lashon Yochid. So Rashi says in his first pshat that it does mean my masters, but Rashi says that he was addressing all the malachim. Why does he continue with Lashon Yochid? Rashi says, like Godol Shebahem Omar, Ukra'om Kulam Adoinim. Ulegodol Shebahem Omar Al Not Tavor. V'Kevon Shelo Yavor Hu Yamdu Chaverov Imoy Ubeloshen Zeh Hu Chol. Meaning that he said he addressed all of them. He said, "My masters," but then he continued and spoke to the Godol Shebahem, to the greatest of them, and he asked him to please not pass by, to please stay on, and with the understanding that if he'll stay behind, so the others will also stay behind. So the beginning of the pasuk, he's addressing them all, and then he speaks to the Godol Shebahem. Ubeloshen zezok Rashi hu choil. So Aleph Daled Nun Yud means my masters. It's choil. But then Rashi says davar acher kodesh. There's a different shot that it really means Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Hakadosh Baruch Hu. V'hoya oimer laHakadosh Baruch Hu lahamtin lo. He was saying to Hashem that he should wait ad sheyorutz v'yachnis esa orchim, until he'll run and bring in the guests. So he's not talking to the malachim; he's talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's why it's Lashon Yochid, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Al No Tavor Me'al Avdecha. So based on this pasuk, the Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Kuf Chav Zayin, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says, Gdoilo Hachnosas Orchim Mehakbolas Pnei Hashchina, that being hospitable to guests surpasses welcoming the divine presence. Gedoyla hachnosas orchim mehakbolas pnei hashchina. Diksiv vayomer Aleph Daled Nun Yud im no matzasi chen be'inecha al no taver me'al avdecha. So he's asking the Rebbeinu Shalom to stay on while he attends to the guests. So you see that hachnosas orchim is greater than hakbolas pnei hashchina. Toisus over there says, Kosovar Kemanda Omar B'Shvuas Daf Lamed Hey, the High Hashem Kodesh, that this Aleph Daled Nun Yud is Kodesh. The Ikemanda Omar Hosom Shehu Chol, Shalom Alochim Hoyim Medaber, Shehoyim Mazmina. There is a Manda Omar in Shvuas that says that it's Chol, and he's talking to the Malachim. And then we have no source for the idea of Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'agbolas B'nei Hashchina. So this Gemara, Rav Yehuda Amarav in Shabbos is following the opinion that it's Kodesh, and he's talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom and is asking him to stay on while he attends to the Orchim. So we see that G'doy La'achnosas Orchim Me'agbolas B'nei Hashchina. But you know, the Rambam brings this halacha in a very interesting way. The Rambam in Hilchos Eivel, Perek Yudalad Halacha Beis, says G'doy La'achnosas Orchim Me'agbolas B'nei Hashchina. Shenemar Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim. So the Rambam doesn't bring the pasuk of Vayomer Aleph Daled Nun Yud Al Notavar Me'al Avdecha. He brings an earlier pasuk that says he saw 3 people. So how did he see in the Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim? that Gdoila Hachnasas Orchim Me'agbolas Pnei Hashchina. And I mean, even if we would figure out how we saw it in this pasuk, I mean, why did the Rambam drop the pasuk that Rav Yehuda Marav brings and bring his own pasuk? I mean, the Rambam sometimes does it when it's a more obvious source, as the Yad Malachi discusses in the Klolei HaRambam. But that's not the case over here. We didn't even understand what you see in Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim. So we could suggest that the Rambam doesn't want to use the pasuk that Rav Yehuda Marav brought, since the pasuk that Rav Yehuda Marav brought is dependent on the Manda Omar that Aleph Dalid Nun Yud is Kodesh. Therefore, the Rambam prefers bringing a pasuk that doesn't depend on how you read the Aleph Dalid Nun Yud. What is the raya from Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim? I mean, maybe we can say that we assume that if it wouldn't be that Hachnosas Orchim is greater than Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina, then when Avram Avinu was busy with Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina, he wouldn't even notice the Orchim. So from the fact that Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim, we can see that Hachnosas Orchim is Gdoila me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina, because Avos Hein HaMerkava, they did everything the way it ought to be done. So from the fact that he noticed the Malachim, we see that Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina. And we'll have to say that Rav Yehuda Marav, that holds like the Manda or Kodesh, he brought a Klora Raya. From the pasuk Al No Taver, that he's asking the Rebbeinu Shalom to stay on while he takes care of the Malachim. But the Rambam is telling us that even the Manda or Machoil, we can also find over here a source for the idea of Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina. However, this is avada not true, because the Rambam in Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah, Seif Perek Vav, says Kol Hashemois Ha'amurois Ba'Avraham Kodesh Av Zeh Shenemar Aleph Daled Nun Yud Im No Matzasi Chen Beinecha Harei Hu Kodesh. So the Rambam L'shitosai that paskin that it's Kodesh had no reason to stay away from Rav Yehuda Marav's source. So we have no idea why the Rambam came up with a different source. But even more so, if you look in the Gemara in Shavuos, Rav Yehuda Marav Bechlal didn't bring any source. Rav Yehuda Marav said, Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina. The Gemara says, Keman Hozlo, whom is Rav Yehuda Marav following? The Gemara says, Keman Da'amar Kodesh. So we have a Mefurish Gemara that without the Man Da'amar Kodesh, you can't see in this parsha Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina, because the Gemara says that Rav Yehuda Marav that said Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina must hold like the Man Da'amar Kodesh. So it's clear that only if you learn that it's Kodesh do you have a source. So what in the world is going on here that the Rambam brings a different pasuk? But the truth of the matter is that Adrabah, the Sugyas HaGemara, that is Toile, the din of Rav Yehuda Marav in the Man Da'amar Kodesh, because only according to him you see in the Al No Tavor, Me'al Avdecha, that he's saying to the Rebbeinu Shalom to stay on while he takes care of the Malachim, the Gemara is very shver. Because before this pasuk already, it's Mefurish. Vayera Elov Hashem be'Eloinei Mamre. Hashem appeared to him, in Eloinei Mamre, the plains of Mamre. V'hu Yoshev Pesach ha'oil kechoim hayoim. Okay. Vayiso Eino Vayar. V'hinei shloisha anoshim nitzavim ola. Vayar vayorotz likrosa mi Pesach ha'oil vayishtachu arza. Only after that comes the pasuk of Vayoimar Aleph Dalid Nun Yudim and No Matzasi Chen Beinecha. So already before this last pasuk, in the earlier psukim, we see that as he was in the state of Kabbalas Pnei Hashchina, Vayera Elov Hashem be'Eloinei Mamre, he nevertheless, he was Vayisoin Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim Vayar vayorotz likrosam. He went to the Malachim. In other words, he left over the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, and he went to the Malachim. So it's Mefurish in the parsha that Gdoila Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Hashchina. Why do we need to bring a raya from that third pasuk where it says Vayoymar Aleph Dalid Nun Yud Im No Motzasi Chen Beinecha Al No Tavor, based on the Mandam HaKodesh? From the psukim before that, we already see that he left the Rebbeinu Shalom and he took care of the malachim. So it would seem that the key to understanding this is really in another problem that we have in this parsha. The pasuk says, "Vayera Elov Hashem be'Elohnei Mamre, v'hu Yoshev Pesach Ha'oil K'choy Mayon." And right away comes the pasuk, "Vayisayin Vayar." He lifted up his eyes and he saw V'nei Shlosha Anoshim. So that the Torah doesn't tell us anything about what happened in this Vayera Elov Hashem. Normally, typically, a Gilu Shchina, there's something is said. Something happens in the context of that Gilu Shchina. But over here, it just says, Vayera Elov Hashem. And the next pasuk says, Vayisayin Vayar. What was the content of this Vayera Elov Hashem? So there are several mahalchim in the Rishonim to deal with this question. The Bechor Shor, which is the Rishon al Torah, and the Cheskuni in his first pshat, say, Ein mukdim u'mu'ucher b'Torah. This Gilu Shchina of Vayera Elov Hashem be'Elohnei Mamre was really after the story of the Malach. In other words, the chronological order is really that this pasuk belongs after pasuk Tes Zayin in Kapitel Yud Ches, after the pasuk of Vayakumu Misham Ha'anoshim v'Goymer. Hashem Omar, Hamachasa ani me'Avrom es asher ani oise. As they were going to destroy Stoim, Hashem said, Hamachasa ani me'Avrom es asher ani oise. Now comes the pasuk Vayera Elov Hashem, that Hashem revealed himself to Avram and told him that he is going to destroy Stoim. So both Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor and the Cheskuni say that this pasuk is b'chlal out of place. This pasuk belongs after this whole story. This pasuk belongs right after pasuk Tes Zayin. Vayakumu v'sham ha'anoshim v'goymer vayoymer Hashem v'Hashem Omar Hamachasa ani me'Avrom. So Mamela, according to them, the Vayera Elov Hashem, there's a content to this Gilu Shchina. I mean, the Rebbeinu Shalom told him about the Mahapecha of Sdom V'Amor. According to the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, you know, the Gilu Shchina of Vayera Elov Hashem was really the coming of the Malachim. The Rambam, as you know, learns that this whole thing didn't happen in the real world. It was just a dream. It was a Mara Hanavua. So that the Vayera Elov Hashem, Hashem appeared to him. What it means is that Hashem showed Avram Avinu in a Mara Nevuah this whole interaction with the Malachim. That is the content of the Vayera Elov Hashem. So that's another way of learning what happened in the Vayera Elov Hashem. What happened was that he had a vision. V'hinei shloisha anoshim. Okay. Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim. That's the vision of Vayera Elov Hashem. The Rashbam, on the other hand, he learns that this story actually happened in the real world. But he says that Vayera Elov Hashem means that the angels were revealed to him. He says, Shebahar b'mekoymes kishenire hamalach. We find in other places, in many places, he says that when a malach appears, koirehu b'loshen shchina, we call a malach Hashem. And Vayera Elov Hashem means that malachim appeared to him. And so also learns the Cheskuni in his second pshat. Okay, so we have three ways to learn what's the content of the Vayera Elov Hashem. Now, according to these Mahalchim, could we bring a raya that Gedoyla Hachnosas Orchim Mehagbolas Pnei Ashchina? Look, according to Rabbi Yosef Bechor Shor, the Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina of Vayera Elov Hashem happened later, long after the Malachim appeared. So Avada, there was never a conflict between the Vayera Elov Hashem, Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina, and the taking care of the Malachim. I mean, and the Hachnosas Orchim. So Avada, there's no raya from here that Gedoyla Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. According to the Rambam, I mean, the whole thing was a dream. Even in the dream, he wasn't being oisik in Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. The vision is referred to as Vayera Elov Hashem, and what's the content of the vision? That he's feeding the Malachim. So there never was a conflict between Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina and Hachnosas Orchim. According to the Rashbam, the Vayera Elov Hashem Bechlal means that Malachim were revealed to him. So again, there's no conflict between Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina and Hachnosas Orchim. So it's clear that Chazal are learning that Yesh Mukdim Amocha B'Torah. This happened here and now. Vayera Elov Hashem was right before the Malachim appeared. It's also clear that Chazal are understanding that this was an independent Gilui Shchina and not via the Malachim, so that there was a real conflict between Hachnosas Orchim and Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. Rashi says that Vayera Elov Hashem is Lavakir Es HaChoyle. It would seem that this is another way to answer that question. In other words, what was said, what was revealed in this Vayera Elov Hashem? So Rashi is saying, Taka, nothing was said. This Vayera is Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim, the presence is the thing. And therefore, we shouldn't be surprised that it doesn't say anything in the Vayera Elov Hashem. What did the Rebbeinu Shalom say? Because he didn't need to say, because Bikur Cholim is by being there. So that's l'chara what Rashi is answering by saying Lavaker es HaChoyle. So the Vayera was an independent Gilui Shchina, and it came right before the Malachim came. But it's still possible that this Gilui Shchina of Vayera Elov Hashem, this Bikur Cholim, was over. And then Vayisa Eino Vayar V'hinei Shlosha Anoshim. In other words, who says that the Shchina was still there when Vayisa Elov Vayar? The first pasuk is Vayera Elov Hashem Be'Elonim Mamre V'hu Yoshev Pesach Oil K'Chaim Hayoim. Okay, that was it. Now Vayisa Eino Vayar could be that the Shechina already left. So we can't bring a raya that G'doyla Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina, because he didn't, because the Shechina was no longer there. So, but if you learn that the third pasuk, Vayomer Aleph Daled Nun Yud Im No Matzasi Chen, is Kodesh, so we see that the Shechina was still there. And then we have a raya that G'doyla Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. So it comes out like this, that Avada the Raya, that Gedoyla Achnosas Orchim Me'Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina, is dependent on the Manda Omar that the Aleph Daled Nun Yud is Kodesh. But the Raya is not in particular from the fact that he said to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Al No Tavor. The Raya is from the Vayar Vayoras L'Krosam. Once we know from Pasuk 3 that as Pasuk that during Pasuk 2, the Shechina was there, so Avada we already see in the Vayar Vayoras L'Krosam that we don't need to bring the raya from the fact that he said to the Rebbeinu Shalom in Pasuk Gimel that Al Notavor. We need to say that the Aleph Daled Nun Yud is Kodesh in order to keep the Shechina there while he was saying, while what happened in Pasuk, in the second Pasuk happened, that he was Vayisa Eino Vayar V'hinei Shlosha Anoshim and Vayar Vayoras L'Krosam. So, therefore, the Rambam doesn't bring the pasuk of Vayomer Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Avadi is following the Mandama Kodesh, like he says in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. But he didn't bring the pasuk of Aleph Daled Nun Yud because the pasuk before that already teaches us that Gedoy Lachnos Esorchem Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. The pasuk of Vayar Vayoras L'Krosam. But it's still shver. The Rambam should have brought Vayar Vayoras L'Krosam. The Rambam brings Vayisa Eino Vayar. The Vayisa Eino Vayar doesn't really tell us anything. So the truth is that in the Rambam, in the Frankel Rambam, it says Vayar v'hinei shloisha anoshim v'chulei. So it's going on the whole pasuk, meaning it includes also the Vayar vayoretz l'krosa. But it's still a little bit shver. Why did he bring Bechal the beginning of the pasuk? The Vayisa and the Vayar tells us nothing. So l'chayr, we could still say that the Rambam brought the beginning of the pasuk because we understand that even the Vayisa and the Vayar wouldn't have happened if Hachnas Sorcha wouldn't be greater than Akbol's Pnei Ashchina, because Avram Avinu was on a madrege that he always did the right thing. And therefore, if Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina was greater, he wouldn't even have noticed the Malachim. So the Rambam started the pasuk from the beginning, but he really means to say the whole pasuk, and the whole pasuk is really the source. Now, and this really has a shaykhis to this particular happening, because we all know Chesed LaAvram. We know that the midah of Avram Avinu is the midah of Chesed, but where in the Torah does the Torah tell us that Avram was a Bal Chesed? The only place in the Torah where the Chesed of Avram Avinu appears is in the welcoming the Malachim in this week's parsha. True, it says later on, Vayita Eishel beBe'er Sheva, and Chazal Taich, that Eishel is a Rashi Tevis, Achila, Shtia, Levoya, but it's not Mefurish in the Torah. I mean, the only parsha in the Torah that describes Avram Avinu's Chesed is this Maisa with the Malachim. Now, l'chayre, it's Shtickle Pella, because this whole Hachnasas Orchim and Gemilas Chasadim Begufay was really just a mistake. I mean, from the beginning to the end. I mean, these guests were not really human. They were malachim that looked like people. They didn't eat. They didn't drink. They didn't need anything. So why did the Torah pick and choose the one time that Avram Avinu did chesed, and it wasn't really a chesed? And this is what the Torah highlights. I mean, that this one time where the whole chesed was really a mistake. This is what the Torah presents as Avram Avinu's chesed. We know we know and believe that Avram Avinu was occupied with doing chasadim, real chasadim, every day. And the one case that the Torah describes is the case where it was really a mistake. The Gemara in the end of the first parak in Bava Kama says, Dorash Rove Maidiksiv Yiyu Muchsholim Lefonecha, that Yirmiyahu davened that about the Anshe Anosois who were Rishoim, that they should stumble. Be'ez apecha asei lahem, that the Rebbeinu Shalom should punish them. Amar Yirmiyah l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Rebbeinu Shalom. I ask of you that afilu b'shosha oisin tzedakah, that even when the anshe anosos do tzedakah, hachshileim b'vnei adam she'enim mu'uganim. So you should bring to them anoshim she'enim mu'uganim, k'dei shelo yikablu aleim schar. In other words, when they already do tzedakah, they should do tzedakah with the wrong people. So somebody that gives tzedakah to anoshim she'enim mu'uganim has no schar. He didn't do a mitzvah. So there's no difference between somebody that's rich and presents himself as poor, or somebody that's an angel and presents himself as a human. In both cases, since the tzedakah and the chesed were unnecessary, unneeded, there's no schar b'chlal. So it comes out that after all Avram Avinu's efforts in the Achnas Sorchim, it was all for naught. I mean, they didn't need the paslechem, they didn't need the ugos, they didn't need the ben bakar rach v'toiv. As Rashi says, "Vayochelu nire k'moy she'achlu." It looked as if they were eating. It's mamish hachshileim b'vnei adam she'einam muhuganim chas v'shol. You could say maybe that the Gemara says that machshov v'toiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzaref l'mais. So l'fizeh l'chari, even when somebody makes a mistake and he gives tzedakah to somebody that didn't need it, he has a mitzvah mikoyach the machshov v'toiv. Because Baruch Hu mitzaref l'maisa. We also say chishev lasos mitzvah v'nenas v'lo yaso mala olav hakasuv kilu aso. So somebody that gave tzedakah to somebody that was really didn't need it, he's avada chishev lasos mitzvah v'nenas v'lo yaso, and mala olav hakasuv kilu aso. He did to the best of his ability. Why did Yirmiyah say about the Anshe Anosos that if there'll be nichshal b'vnei adam she'ena mohuganim lo yikablu aleim schar. Probably because the Anshe Anosais were Rishonim. They didn't really want to give tzedakah. If they already gave tzedakah once in a while, it was only for ulterior motives. It wasn't a chishev lasis mitzvah. They really didn't want to do a mitzvah. There was social pressure. There was a reason. So Mamela, if they would actually give it to somebody who needs it, so even though the machshava wasn't a machshava toiva, but the consequences there, and the mitzvah was neskayim. So, but somebody that has no machshava toiva, and the ma'isa is also not a ma'isa because hachshilim b'vnei adam she'enim u'ganim, he's talking not mekabel schar. But Avram Avinu, who Avada meant to do chesed, his kavanah was l'shem shamayim. So in spite of the fact that the orchim weren't really human and they didn't really need it, it's at least a chishev lasos mitzvah. V'nenas v'lo yosa. Machshava toiva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzaref ala ma'aseh. And in Mela, there is something. There is value. There is schar. But after all this, Avada, the question remains, I mean, how's it possible that from all the daily chasadim that Avram Avinu did all his life, the Torah chose to tell us the story about the chesed that was just a chishev lasis mitzvah. And then as v'lo yasa. And you know, in the story itself, Rashi says, "K'choy mayoim hoitzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu chama minar teika k'dei sheloi lahatrichoi ba'orchim." HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it so hot that orchim shouldn't be traveling, so that Avram Avinu shouldn't have to be matriach ba'orchim on the third day of his milah. U'lefi shera'ohu mitzta'er sheloi hoyu orchim. Since he saw that it was bothering him that he had no guests. So sheloi hoyu orchim boim hevi olav malachim b'tmus anoshim. So he brought malachim that looked like people. So my Rebbe, Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, asked in the Chumash, so why didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu just put the sun back into the Nartik? I mean, cool the day down, cool it off, and then real people would come. Why did he keep the sun out and bring malachim that looked like people? Yeah. You know, in the Hemshech of the Parsha, the Torah describes at length the tefillah of Avram Avinu for the Anshe's doing, right? He tried over and over again until the last moment to hold back the hafiche of Stoim va'amora. But in the end of the story, this whole effort had nothing came of it, right? In Sdoim, they weren't Chamishim Tzadikim, and they weren't Chamishim Pachis Chamishim, and they weren't Arboim, and they weren't Shloishim, and they weren't Esrim, and they weren't even Asara. So the whole dialogue that Avram Avinu has with Rebbeinu Shalom was based on numbers that didn't exist. I mean, he thought maybe, but the whole thing was really a mistake. And then Vayelech Hashem kashe kilo ledaber im Avram v'Avram shovlim koimoi. Everything goes back to where it was. Nothing was accomplished. Nothing changed. So why is the Torah so marich in describing to us this tefillah that had really no chance to be received? It had no chance because it was based on numbers that didn't exist. And truth is that this tefillah is the only tefillah that's mafurish in the Torah that Avram Avinu davened. And this is the source for Tefillah Shachris, Shetikin Avram Avinu, that we daven every day. The din of Koivei HaMokim L'Tfilosai, we learn from the Pasuk El HaMokim Asher Omat Sham. This Amida is the Amida that he's standing and davening in the Tefillah for the Anshe's Doim V'Amor. So the source of Tefillah is a tefillah that wasn't accepted, a tefillah that wasn't received, a tefillah that didn't accomplish. And then once again, in the Hemshech of the Parsha, we have the Akedah, and we see again an effort that bears no fruit. I mean, a want that isn't realized. Because after he takes the Eish and the Eitzim, and he goes for 3 days, and he's all worked up, and he finally gets to the moment, Avram Avinu takes the machelas, lishchitas benoi, comes the tzivui, that changes the whole thing. Al tishlach yodcha lanav, al tas lemuma. So the whole emotional preparation and the entire effort and the whole journey, I mean, it just nothing came of it. So what is this about? So the mice of the malachim, yeah. So it says that what that Hoitzi Hakadosh Baruch Hu Chama Min Artika Shelo Yatzrichu Oisei Orchim Ukshero'ohu Mitztaer Shelo Hoyu Orchim Boim Hevi Olav Malachim B'Tmus Anoshim L'Chore Hakol Goli V'Yadu Olafanov. The Rebbeinu Shalom knows the future. He's Tzoifa Umabit Ad Soif Kol Adoros. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu knew l'chatchila that Avram Avinu is going to be Mitztaer. So why did he do this? Hoitzi Chama Min Artika Kedei Shelo Yitztar. I mean, Shelo Yatriach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that he'll be mitztar. He'll be pained by not having Garchim. So we must say that all this was mechuven. All this was part of the plan. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought Avram Avinu to a state of tsar about the loy hoyu orchim boim, which is a tsar that comes from his deep want to be oisik in gemilas chasodim begufay. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaches him that this tsar in itself is in itself the reason not to be mitzvah. In other words, he brings anoshim, that in the end we find out that they're malachim, and there's no kiyum of gemilas chasodim. So Avram Avinu learns from this that the ikr is the effort. It's not the consequence. It's not the accomplishment. It's the effort. It's the wanting. It's the trying. The accomplishing, the accomplishment. That's in the hands of the Rebbeinu Shalom. What shapes who we are, what defines us, is the effort, is the want, and therefore Avram Avinu learns, so to speak, the hard way, that the pain of not having Orchim, that in itself is what the Rebbeinu Shalom is looking for. And therefore he brings him anoshim that are not really anoshim, the malachim that they're really malachim, because he's teaching him that it's the effort, it's the want, it's the trying. That's what defines you. And therefore the Torah chooses dafka this chesed of Avram Avinu from all the chasadim that he did, because all the chasadim were chasadim where he accomplished. But the message is that accomplishment is beyond the scope of your achrayus, because not always can you accomplish. But the message is that loy olecha hamaloche ligmor, the ein ato ben chorin lipoter mimena. In other words, when a person thinks that it's his responsibility, hamaloche ligmor, then sometimes he feels that he's a ben chorin lipoter mimena, because he sees that he can't be gomer. He sees that he can't carry out. He sees that he can't accomplish. So he doesn't even start, right? Because he thinks that alecha hamalacha ligmar. So why start if I can't be gomer? So Chazal say no, lo alecha hamalacha ligmar, and therefore einata ben chayrin lipata mimena. You have to do as much as you can do. Like they say, the Chafetz Chaim said, "Unser Arbeit ist ton, nicht ufton." Our job is to do, not to accomplish. Yeah, but in Yiddish it goes much better. So and that's why the Torah gives us ba'arichas the story of Avram Avinu's tefillah for Anshe's Doim, a tefillah that didn't accomplish anything, because the fact that the tefillah didn't accomplish anything doesn't diminish the madrega of the tefillah, and doesn't tell us anything about the value of the tefillah. The value of the tefillah is in the tefillah itself, and so also in the akedah, the readiness and the effort and the hishtadlus already have in them the entire godless of the Maisa. Like we see, Efroi Shel Yitzchok, Tzavur al Gabe HaMizbeach. We say the ashes of Yitzchok are Tzavur al Gabe HaMizbeach, even though there were no ashes. But in the eyes of the Rebbeinu Shalom, it's ashes. Because in the eyes of the Rebbeinu Shalom, the effort is the accomplishment. And that's really the idea of Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina. Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina is really the consequence. It's the reward. It's the connection with the Shchina. But we say that's the consequence of everything we do. But Gedola Hachnosas Orchem Hakbolas Pnei Ashchina means that the ongoing effort, the doing, the going towards, the movement, the journey, that carries more weight than the being there. The Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina is the being there. The Hachnosas Orchim is the effort, is the journey, is the going towards there. So, and that's the idea of Yofesh Shoachas B'tshuve U'Maisim Toivim Ba'olam Hazeh Mikol Chai Olam Habo. That's Gedolah Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina. So, Mamela, it's poshut that the limud of Gedolah Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina comes from a Maisa Chesed that itself was just a hishtadlus, because the whole yisoid of Gedolah Hachnosas Orchim Me'Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina is that hishtadlus is more than accomplishment. So here it's pure hishtadlus without any accomplishment in the act itself. And Mamela, the Rambam really brings the pasuk, starts the pasuk from the beginning. Vayera v'hinei shloisha anoshim. Not only is the Hachnosas Orchim bepoil, the actual Hachnosas Orchim, greater than Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina. Even a imaginary Hachnosas Orchim is greater than Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina. Even the effort for Hachnosas Orchim is greater than Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina. And not only that, even the effort to reach the effort, the first Hachona, the Vayisa'ina Vayar, is more than Hakbalas Pnei Ashchina. Therefore, the Rambam begins the pasuk from the beginning. Yeah, you know that as far as the Akedah is concerned, Chazal say in the Midrashim that the Satan tried to hold back Avraham Avinu from doing the Akedah with all kind of tricks he pulled on him. He wanted to hold him back from doing the Akedah. The Briskerov, asked, why was the Satan against the Akedah? I mean, if Yitzchak would be sacrificed, there would be no Klal Yisrael, and there would be no Jews. So Torah mitzvahs would be over. And that's really what the Satan wants. So he should have let Avraham Avinu shecht Yitzchak. Said the Briskerov, you see from here that the Satan doesn't make cheshbonis of tachlis. He doesn't look at the consequences. He knows that if there's a mitzvah, he has to be against. And if there's a mitzvah to shecht Yitzchak, even though if this mitzvah will be carried out, he won the war, but he doesn't look at it that way. He knows that his job is to fight against mitzvahs. And Mamela said to Briskerov, the same thing is Zela Umazeh, that we should never be looking at consequences. We should do what's right. And if it's right, you do it. And what the consequences will be, that's the Rebbeinu Shalom's business. You see what happens when you look at consequences in this week's parsha also, because Vatoyme habachira el haseira avinu zaken v'ish ein ba'aretz lavay oleinu kederech kol haaretz hava nashkes avinu yayin yeven achayim avinu zera. They were worried about consequences, and when you look at the consequences, so the ends justify the means, and that could be the root of all evil. And Mamela, the v'nechayim me'avinu zera, which is a focus on the consequences, is really the aim kol chatos. And as the Gemara says, my demifkedis iboyaloch lemeved. Chizkiyo didn't want to have children because he saw the nafki minei bnin deloy malin, that he's going to have children that won't be they'll be Rishon. And Yeshaya Hanavi says to him, my demifkedis boyis lemeved. You're mechuyev to be mekayim your mitzvah. My deniche kame kutchabrich will levet who, what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants that he should take care of. In other words, again, the person's focus is on what he's doing and not on what the consequences are. And Mamela, but the truth of the matter is, consequences are not always the consequences that one expects. Avraham Avinu, he fed the malachim. He thought that he was feeding them, and he wasn't. However, from this Maisa, he became the root of Chesed for Klal Yisrael L'Doros. So, in other words, it has far-reaching consequences, way beyond feeding those three men. It had consequences that it guides us ad etzem hayom hazeh. The tefillah sdoim is the yisoid of the tefillas of his tiknum l'dorei doros, right? It showed the way for tefillah. So, in spite of the fact that it didn't accomplish what he set out to accomplish, but it accomplished much more. And the same thing is with Vayikach es ma'acheles by the Akedah. Rashi says, ma'acheles li Yisrael she'oichlim schora. It's still feeding us. It's ma'achel li Yisrael she'oichlim schora. So the consequences are there, but they're not always then and there. They're not always what we expected, what we wanted, but everything has consequences in the world of Kafshid Rahman. In any case, Rabbi Say, having said that, I want to seize this opportunity to wish you a good Shabbos.